Welcome to the Ultimate Backyard Makeover. I want to show you how to use and reuse paving stones to create perfect small backyard oasis. Let's check out how it went. So you have our before and then our after. Simple design to start, just a hand sketch drawing, some initial excavation and test holes, find where we can connect to the existing drainage, and we're going to do some clearing and grubbing. Set up some heights using a laser level. Establish our depth of excavation, sand, and road base. I like to set it up on a board so that I can easily reference back to it, taking into account the compaction of the 1 inch of sand layer to about 3/4 of an inch, and our total height of road base layer. So top to bottom of that gets us our depth of excavation. We're also going to figure out which direction we want water to flow so that we can set up a drain. So we're going to trench it across, set up a hidden drain with a perforated pipe and 3/4 inch clear crush on the far end of the patio so that it drains really nice and quick. We're going to make sure that we have our string lines set up really tight and to the correct final heights so that we can build up to them really precisely. Sloping away from the building, we're going to set up stakes on the 4 corners of the perimeter of the main patio surface, measure the length in the direction of the slope, times that by 1.5% gives us how many inches we need to drop our string lines on this far side. Once our string lines are set to the final height, with our slope, we're going to work our gravel layers in no greater than 4-inch lifts, compacting each layer very well, multiple times, multiple directions, to get up to that final height. This top layer, I'm actually going to use a screed board to make it really nice and flat. You can see a mark on the end of the board there. That takes into account the height of the paver and the sand as well to get us up to that finished height. So we get that final road base layer really nice and clean and flat to the slope set on our string lines. From there, we're taking our screed bars, 1-inch square tubing, and our screed board once again, and smoothing out an exact layer of 1 inch of sand. We're going to fine tune up against this existing step to get that perfect 1-inch layer of sand. Once we're finished screeding the entire surface, we're just going to fine tune once again up against this existing step to make sure that we're sitting just about a 1/4 inch higher, because we will be running the compactor on the surface to set the paving stones into the sand. I like to use the sand to make marks and establish parallel lines as references to work off of, to keep those pavers really nice and straight and parallel to the building when we start to lay them down. We can set up string lines for that as well. We're going to lay out a little sample section in what's called a herringbone pattern using the ICPI recommended click and drop method. So putting it up against the pavers before and dropping it straight down and zipping our way back and forth along this herringbone pattern as we start to lay down the infill. After that, we're going to set up our border. So on this edge, we're going to have a nice smooth curvature, and I'm going to show you a couple different techniques on how to establish that curve and make it nice and smooth and strong. I like to use the maximum gap of about 3/4 of an inch, about the width of your finger, to sort of establish a nice smooth curve. Keeping that gap consistent on the outside edge is a great way to tell if the curvature is nice and smooth and consistent as well. And where the curvature is too tight there, you can see I've mapped out a couple of pavers on top of other pavers there. You'll see that a little closer in a sec. So nice smooth inside-outside curve until it gets too sharp. Then I have it laid out a little differently, and then back to our smooth curve there after that. So before we get into the curve, let's look at some basic marking and cutting. So I'm holding the paver on top of the soldier's course in this case, and looking straight down and marking the actual apex of where it matches up to the paver below it. We can use a grinder set up for wet cutting. Has to be a specialty grinder for that, or we can use a small battery-powered cutoff saw like this one, which is great for some of the finer cuts like these curvatures. So if we have to cut in around a downspout, we can set it up on a couple of blocks and drive the saw in at a few angles from the outside. And smooth it out from there. Or we can use the IQ Power Tool saw to make some fine cuts as well. Key here is to make sure that our marks are consistent so that we can cut and replace these pavers in groups and cut it all the way in, all the way along the perimeter. For this tighter curvature, I've laid it out so that the pavers are set up sitting on top of pavers below it at the maximum width so that I can drive a mark down from the top, mark it onto the pavers below, and I'm going to number them and cut each of those wedges and replace it back in there. That way we won't have too big of a gap on that outside edge and sand will still stay in place. Making sure they fit nicely, doing some final adjustments. Cutting it all in. I like to reuse the excess material on the side of the insulation, sand and road base, mix it with type 10 cement, 3:1 ratio, and use that as my edge restraint. As long as it's a nice strong curb of mortar. And then we're going to do some fine tuning, make sure our lines are really nice and crisp, and spread in some jointing sand. I like to fine tune some of the edges with the hand tamper before I use the plate compactor on the surface. We're trying to drive sand up into the joints of the paver from below by compacting on the surface, as well as drive our jointing sand and consolidate it into the joints. So we're creating what's called lockup, and it's a tension over the whole surface. We want to sweep the jointing sand off, get rid of the excess, but not take off too much. It has to be at the correct height so that we don't leave any space for weed seeds to be able to collect in the joints. There's our before. And some river rock detail along the outside edge that doubles as our hidden drainage. It's a nice maintainable layer with a layer of geotech cloth underneath. And our nice flat gravel area there with our reused paving stones and a small bridge detail to separate the spaces. I love pairing river rock and lights and even some core glow glowing rocks for some added interest. Thanks for watching the Ultimate Backyard Makeover. Talk to you soon.